Hello everybody, it's Mr. E from Art with Mr. E, and today we are talking about weaving. Now this is different than the circle weaving project that I've already put up on YouTube. This is more of a tapestry type weaving. It's rectangular instead of circular. Now, what you'll need is some sturdy cardboard, scissors, tape, and yarn. Alright? Now this is a skein of yarn, a standard skein of yarn from Walmart, but you can get it a lot of different places. This is under $3 for a full skein. Pretty big. Now, Dollar Tree also has started carrying yarn, at least the ones around where I live. This is what their yarn looks like. I'm not sure what worsted means. But this is what their skein of yarn. It's a little bit smaller, but it is only $1, and they do have a variety of colors. So if you just want practice weaving, you could go get a skein of yarn for $1. That's pretty good. And the rest of the stuff you probably have around your house. Now, let's move some of this out of the way. If you are making your own loom, a loom is a surface that you are weaving on. It could be made out of plastic, wood, metal, or cardboard. You will need to have a rectangular type shape, get a ruler, and measure off at the bottom and the top. You could just take your ruler, lay it down, and evenly mark it top and bottom all the way across. Just make sure that it's even number at the top and the bottom. And then you cut in just a notch, enough to secure your yarn into the loom. Now, there are pre-notched looms as well, which they are definitely handy dandy. And you'll need enough yarn to go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Now, there are a variety of ways to do weaving, and some people do pouches, and that would require you to do the front and the back. I'm just going to show you how to do the front. So you take your yarn and you put it through your first notch, all right? I would say about 1 inch to 2 inches on the back, enough to secure it with a piece of tape. You don't need to be excessive with your taping, just enough to tack it down so it doesn't come loose. Then you will go down into your notch, next door neighbor, up, next door neighbor, down, next door neighbor, up, neighbor, down, neighbor, up, and neighbor, down, till you've gone across all of your notches. All right? So you might not want to cut it from your skein unless you're like me and I already knew the size that I would need. Now, you want to pull this tight, but not overly tight. You don't want to bow the loom. Like, you don't want your loom to do this. If it does that, you have pulled too tight. But you also don't want your strings all loosey-goosey. All right? So make sure that you are securing it down and pulling it tight on the back without bowing your loom. And then once again, just get a small piece of tape, secure it, and then if you have excess, then just trim that off. I always like to leave a little bit of a tail just in case I need to reposition it later. Now, what we have just put on here are the warp strings. So your loom is a surface that you weave on. I view the warp strings as the skeleton of your weaving. Imagine if you did not have bones. You'd be a pile of mush on the floor, right? Well, if you didn't have warp strings, the warp strings provide structure like bones do. You would just have a pile of yarn. It wouldn't really be a weaving. It'd just be a pile of yarn there. So these are the bones. And don't worry, we're not going to see the bones when we're done. Because what we do is weave with the weft. The weft is like the skin of your weaving. See how it covers up the bones? As you go up, you're covering it up. It's like you're putting a layer of skin over top of the bone so you don't see it. Now, the weaving I am doing is an A-B pattern. So that's not too hard. All right, I know that you guys can do that. So you get some yarn to weave with. You need enough that you won't have to keep tying on new strings, but you don't want so much that it becomes awkward. Because if you have too much yarn, it's really hard to handle. Now, I like to start by going under first. Under, over, under, over, under, over, under. So I went under, over, under, over, under, over, under. A, B, A, B, A, B, A. All right? Now, I did fail to mention one thing that could help you out, and that is taking a pencil and making a mark right underneath your warp string. Because there are two things that tend to go a little off when you're weaving in this manner. One is double jumping, the other is hourglassing. Hourglassing is when you pull too hard on your strings and you start pulling your warp strings inward. You ever have one of those sand timers for any games that you have at home? That's an hourglass that the sand goes through. And it kind of looks like that. That's why they call it an hourglass. So by making those marks underneath the two end strings, you will know if you start pulling in too tightly, because you'll start seeing them. If you see them, uh-oh, I've pulled too tight. All right. So I like to have my students pull their string through and leave a tail that's a couple inches long hanging off the end. Then we take the other end of our string. We went under on this one. We are going to go over on this one. Over, under, over, under. So it is the opposite pattern that we just did. So here we went under, over. Here we're going over, under. Now, another trick that I do is I put a pencil right here at the warp string so that when I pull my weft string through, it will not pull it too tight. It will not hourglass. So I just put my eraser end down, and then I use my fingers and rake my yarn downwards. All right. And then I'm ready for my next row. Now, this will create the weaving pattern on here. And as you go up, it'll start covering up your warp strings. You will not see the warp strings after you get a few in. I know right now you kind of see them. That's to be expected. No worries, you're fine. So I went over this last string right here, so that means I'm going to go under. So it's an AB pattern across, an AB pattern going up. So I'm going to go over, under, over, or I went, sorry, under, over, under, over. All right, take my pencil, pull it through, rake it with my fingers, and I just continue to go up, 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 up. Now, if you want to tie your next string on, with a loom that's this small, you can kind of just leave it hang off the end when you start a new string, as long as the old string goes to the edge. But if not, and you need to tie a new string on, then you put them side by side, wrap it around your finger. See that little loop? There's the bunny ears. Pop the loop off, take the bunny ears, push them around and up through the hole. And then you pull, make sure you grab both bunny ears. I've lost my bunny ears, guys. Ah! Let's try that again. Wrap it around. Okay, both bunny ears, push it around and up through the hole. and pull. And you want it to be as small as you possibly can, but keep your knot intact. Now, if you want, you can trim them off before you start weaving again, or you can trim them off at the end. Sometimes they just hide themselves in your weaving. So when you're doing a weaving that is larger, definitely a good idea, I feel, to tie your next string on. With a smaller weaving, you may be able to leave it off of the edge and it will be fine. But you just continue that pattern all the way up, raking it down with your fingers. Make sure that you do not go over, or under. One way that you'll know if you've gone over, or under, which is double jumping, is you will see the same pattern in 2 lines or more. So it'll look exactly the same. It should always alternate. It should not be 2 lines the same. So if you see 2 lines the same, then you know you've double jumped, or if you start seeing the warp strings again. All right? All right, friends, happy weaving.